Well, thank you very much. I'm very pleasured to be standing here today together with my colleague Jos Sanders. In this keynote, we will take you into the changing world of society and work. And we want to call you to action to prepare our students for that work. My name is Wietske Kuijer. I'm a professor of Han University of Applied Sciences on responsive vocational and professional education, and also working as a senior researcher at Radboud UMC Health Academy. And Jos?
Hi, my name is Jos Sanders. I am a professor in lifelong learning, also at Han University of Applied Sciences. And I do also work as a senior research scientist at the Dutch or the Netherlands Organization for Applied Scientific Research, TNO. You may know that as well. Wietske.
Yes. Well, we have 3 parts in this keynote lecture, and we hope to be on time when we are finished with this talk. We are a little bit late, but we'll do our best. In the first talk, we're going to talk about change, and Jos is taking us from an HRD perspective on a more skills-based approach in preparing learner for new tasks and to learn from new tasks. In part 2, we will zoom into the learning perspective, how to learn for change, actually, in formal education. And as you will notice in our talks, we will intertwine between the world of education and the world of work. And that's actually why we are standing here together today. Jos is talking from an HRD perspective, and myself, I am talking from a more educational perspective. But we need both perspectives to make it work, and we have to bring together the worlds of education and work. So part 3 of our keynote speech is about bringing together those worlds in new forms of work-based learning and in creating powerful working and learning environments in professional practice. So Jos, take ahead.
Well, thank you, Wietske. As you already mentioned, I have an HRD, HRM background, so my view on learning and development is from that background. And I would like to start off with showing you a brief movie. And I want you to pay close attention, because this will be like in the test. So I'll be asking a few questions on what you see. And I hope this works. And it does.
From the beginning of time, each passing age has left behind some vital knowledge.
Although the sound is off.
Earlier marvels and developing newer miracles.
We need to start again. Because the sound at the start of this movie is really important, of course. So there we go. Okay, again, please pay close attention.
It's hesitating a little bit.
I will not be asking questions about what went wrong.
From the beginning of time, each passing age has left behind some vital knowledge, improving its earlier marvels and developing newer miracles.
Because of the miracle of synchro tuning, picture and sound come in together just like that.
lots of changes around the country now. Seems like everyone's on the move.
Holy crap.
So how are you doing? I'll just ask a question. Just this movie, I showed this movie for a specific reason. So I'm going to ask you one question. Who wants to answer the question I'm going to ask? You're smiling. So the question I have is, what strikes you the most about this movie? What do you think when you see this movie?
It's overwhelming.
Overwhelming. Who agrees with that, well, notion? I think I had the same feeling when I saw this movie. But also, I'll just place this back. But also when I saw this movie, what struck me the most was what I liked most about it was the fact that there's a different pace in change. So there's not a lot of change. It's not so much the fact that a lot is changing and it keeps on changing, but we have had change before. And you see in this movie, these black and white pictures, that change was communicated in a different manner, in a different pace. You saw these brief moments in this movie where you see, okay, an automobile is introduced. When something new was introduced like 40 years ago, there was a different pace in the introduction. Did you notice? I did. I thought it was really, well, there's a new automobile coming, and we introduced it, like these black and white pictures. So what I meant to show with this small movie was that change is here. It has been here. It's always been here. But the pace of change is changing, and also the pace of communicating about this change is also changing, which might be, a little bit, well, overwhelming nowadays. So it might give some stress. That's what this guy is also like trying to show. So it's highly interesting to see all these kinds of futures, all these things we have to deal with, all these choices we have to make. That might be rather difficult to make choices. Which change are we going to chase? Which change is the change that we're following? We used to have the option between a car and nothing. And now we have an option between robots and digitalization. It's just a lot of different kinds of changes to chase. So I think it's rather difficult to make choices. But there is a lot of research going on about these changes. So what do these changes mean for our work, for our daily job? What kind of influence do they have on the skills that are in demand? So there's a lot of research going on in that area. A lot of good research as well. From MIT, you all know MIT, but also from University of Applied Sciences, like Future of Work. So MIT is like the second machine age. There's a lot of research going on. But all this research actually is kind of, well, how do you use all that research? It's a lot. It's too generic. Most of it is rather vague. It's rather big. It's huge. It's about robots taking over our jobs. So what can we do with that information as an individual? It's too much, too vague, too far on the way. And it's supposed to set us in motion, but does it really set us in motion? Or does it, is it so overwhelming that it kind of leads to the reaction of freezing? Does it give so much stress that we forget to act, or choose not to act, or choose not to choose because there's too much choice? So this might lead to the indifference, to the whatever, so talk to the hand, like what this picture is saying. And I think that is a reaction, the freeze reaction, that isn't a reaction that is not the best reaction or response to all this change happening. Because if we start freezing or being indifferent, that is when learning actually becomes chasing change or learning after the facts. And I think it's important to stay ahead of the facts or stay ahead of change or be part of change in order to, keep up with the pace of development. So when learning becomes chasing, learning becomes a stressor, actually. So recently we've done some research into this aspect of what does it mean when people actually have the feeling that they are chasing change rather than being part of it. So these studies are into the phenomenon of economic skills obsolescence, the experience that you have skills that are outdated or that your skill set is no longer that much in demand. So this perceived economic skills obsolescence may actually lead to burnout reactions and to work disengagement. And we are showing now in an article which is under review at the Journal of Organizational Behavior that this actually leads to absence. So absenteeism is increasing because of the fact that people actually are experiencing the fact that their skills become outdated even more rapidly. And that doesn't really help, not at the micro level. So it hinders people to actually start learning more or learning the right things or keeping up with the pace of change that is happening. So on the micro level, it gives stress and it increases absenteeism, which on the macro level, and here I did some creativity on my own, on the macro level, this might lead to an increasing mismatch in the labor market as well. So I'm going to show this with an impressive visualization. So you see this shift in skills demand in the labor market, right? So you see this red dot, which is the skills demand. You see the change in the skills demand. And you see the part of the skill set that a labor market has being used productively, so the skills being used productively, in the center, that decreases with the skills demand changing. But when we start learning or upskilling or educating people, we may increase the number of skills being used productively again. So you have this area of overlap, which is increasing in size. But when change keeps happening and disruptions keep happening, it becomes rather difficult to keep up with that change. So that's when you see skills shortages on the one hand and skills surpluses on the other hand, because the match is more difficult to make. So what this picture actually shows is what we see now in the labor market, that there's, on the one hand, there's a lot of people without a job standing beside the labor market, and on the other hand, there's an increasing amount of vacancies that are not being filled. So you see this increasing mismatch between skills demand and skills supply. And that is when I think it is highly necessary to start thinking about, so how can we take care of this process of people actually not freezing or being indifferent or stop learning or losing their interest in keeping up with this change, but keeping up with this change and taking care of their own fit to what is in demand in the labor market, as well as with each other, taking care of the match that we see in the labor market as a whole. So that's when I introduced the concept of sustainable employability. Some of you might know the concept, which is defined by Van der Klink and colleagues as continuously having realizable opportunities. It's rather important that these opportunities are realizable, so you must be able to reach like the interventions that are needed at a certain point to refit with what is in demand. And conditions to remain productive and healthy, because your personal health is like really a basic precondition for remaining employable, but also to learn in current and future work. So you would have to take into account changes in skills demand with the choices you make in your own development. But it also demands an appropriate work context that enables people, as well as an attitude and motivation to do so. So you need people to have this attitude, motivation, to stay focused on what is changing and to actually adapt to that change that is happening. So I will briefly explain it with this, what we call as like a flow model of sustainable employability. It's a process most workers will go through, like consciously or less consciously, but they all go through it, and I think it's an important process to be aware of. So this process is the process of having a fit, experiencing a fit. It's based upon the person-job fit theory of Christoph Brown, or the person-environment fit theory. It's all about remaining fit for the labor market. So you have this period of, okay, you find a job and you experience, okay, I do not really fit with this job, but I'm just starting. So at a certain time you experience a good fit with what's in demand. And in due time, you'll experience a certain amount of misfit. And that will be caused by like internal processes in yourself, in motivation or in skills. But also external processes can be causing like this misfit. So the internal processes are wear and atrophy. And wear is about your physical skills are changing. Some athletes will experience, in due time, will experience that they can't run that fast anymore. Or construction workers will experience that their back is not holding. So this is wear. So your physical skills are no longer suitable for what is in demand. Atrophy, which would mean that your skills, when you don't use your skills, they actually lose their value for the labor market. So you might have skills, but if you don't use them, you lose them. It's like my English or Spanish. If you don't use that language in international conferences, it might just slip away. And the external part, changes in job demand, company-specific changes, but also changes in employment structures, which we've seen the last few years. For instance, in aviation, pilots and stewardesses. Is that an English term? Stewardess? I think so. They were not that much in demand, so those skill sets were not in demand. And those changes in demand for skill sets might also lead to a depreciation of the value of what you have as a skill set. So these causes for misfit to occur, you should always be aware of those processes happening. And some of us will be aware of them themselves, and others may need some information or some help to actually see these processes happening. And then there's, of course, the process of taking up the realizable opportunities within your context, within your work context, improving your health, improving your diet, or learning new skills which are in demand because job content is changing or employment structure is changing. You could also opt for the mobility as a cluster of interventions, like changing the work that you do, because the skills that you use in your current job may no longer be in demand in that job, but you could take your skills and move to another job to actually make them valuable again. And the last cluster of interventions would be work redesign, just altering your job in order to have your job suit what skills and motivation you have. So these are interventions that you can take, or realizable opportunities that you can take up in order to reach the state of refit. But of course, it is some sort of like a continuum. So this state of refit will always be under pressure because of changes within yourself, within your aspirations, your drives, your motivation, but also your skill set. but also changes outside yourself. So you will have to make that process again and again and again. And some can do it themselves, but others need some guidance or leadership or educators to help them during the process. So I've shown this in classes also to students, and most students say, okay, but you can have this model and also use it in education. Just change person into student and work into education, and you'll have the same process happening. So you can experience a fit or a misfit with the profession you chose or with the education you chose. Always being aware of the changes within yourself, within your ideas of what you want to do, but also changes outside yourself. The demand for the profession that you have chosen before, it might change. The profession might change. So being able to deal with all these information on changes and all these changes themselves in order to stay fit. Some of us have to leave already. It's okay. So just to show you that it's not something I'm thinking of right now, right here, there's a huge amount of studies into this fit literature in the HR department. At first I thought I'd bring with me this canon of HRM, this huge Bible of HRM studies with all theories available. But it's too heavy. So in order to prevent wear from happening, I've just decided to show you a little bit of this theory on fit. But I think this is rather close to what Wietske is going to tell you about with this adaptive expertise and adaptive performance. So I will now give the floor to Wietske, who's going to take us through this process with another pair of glasses, the educational pair of glasses.
Thank you, Jos. And I think we also had to learn to understand each other because we're speaking a different language. And I will speak through the lens of adaptive expertise development, actually. And this brings us to part two, learning to deal with change. And I think Jos started with a movie with the rapid changes ahead. And this asks from us to deal with a lot of uncertainty. And I think a main task for us as educator is to prepare our students to deal with this uncertainty, to give them the confidence and the trust to be able to getting along in the world of the changing work and work tasks. When we see there is a misfit, we see that sometimes a shift in focus is needed for what you are going to do yourself. Your older learned routines doesn't fit anymore. But sometimes it's also about not only learning for new tasks, but it's also learning for complex tasks or ill-structured tasks or open-ended tasks. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about in this part of the keynote lecture. It's about adaptability. And adaptability is what we have to adapt to these changes. And we don't only have to adapt to these changes, we also have to innovate our working ways, to innovate new procedures and new things to do. And when we are working on issues that are complicated, we don't only need our own skills, our own knowledge, but we also need the skills and knowledge of others. We have to integrate those perspectives. Dealing with complex or ill-structured tasks asks for collaboration. And also working on these bigger issues, these societal issues Bridget talked about in the beginning of our talk, in these cases, we as educators don't know what's happening also. So we are not able to prepare our students by showing it how to do it. We don't know it either ourselves. And that's a big challenge for us too. And I think when we look at the research, then Bernard outlines already in 2004 that the speed and the nature of the changes we now face that require curriculum and pedagogical changes. And Boshausen names the importance of innovativeness and being able to collaborate with multiple disciplines. And Gell and Unwin outline the importance of redefining the theory-practice relationship in vocational and professional education. The traditional paradigm of you learn theory at school and you learn to practice, to apply it in practice, that is no longer tenable anymore. Leitinen, Heikräinen, and Pelonen outline the importance of applying new learning theories, focusing more on knowledge creation. So we have to create together and shape in that way our new future. And Pelonen identifies the importance of education for communities, for working in networks. So in short, when we look at our current educational system, who's usually built on learning for fixed tasks, for assignments that we are making from our educational system to apply in practice, to tell us in assignments what is good or what is wrong, well, actually we don't know sometimes what is good or what is wrong. So this is no longer in line what society demands from us. And I want to take you through the results of our research on adaptive expertise development. And adaptive expertise, we started with a review study on conceptualization, and we saw in literature that a lot of concepts were used in talking about these adaptivity and innovativeness. It's about adaptive expertise, it's about adaptive performance, adaptive skill, adaptability, and even also just about expertise. So what is the difference between adaptive expertise and expertise? Well, it is a little bit blurry actually, and it still is. It's not about adaptive learning, because adaptive learning is about changing your task to the skills, to the level you're able to take up to in the research skills. But in adaptive expertise, it's more about complexity preservation. I'll talk to you a little bit about that in a minute. What we also saw in the literature, that the perspectives from HRD and from the educational sciences did not come together. In the educational literature, we talk about adaptive expertise. In the HRD literature, we talked about adaptive performance. And those were two different streams of knowledge, actually, and we tried to bring them together in our literature. So adaptive expertise, adaptive performance is the capacity to make appropriate responses to a change or a changing situation. So this also takes a normative stance, actually. And we need flexible work behaviors, and we need, in that case, we need problem solving. We need to deal with uncertainty. We need new learning and adaptability. Those are just two of the operationalizations on adaptive performance we found in our review. The research shows us that adaptive expertise is actually the visible behavior of an adaptive expert. And this behavior is triggered by change. And that's a really huge concept. So we couldn't distinguish the amount of change, what was needed. So it differed in the reviews from it was new for only the student until it was new for the whole world. But we have to bring our students in situations where there was a call upon change. So coping with change by the student and professional is depending on the zone of proximal development. And when you look at these bullet points, you may ask, well, that's not quite different for what we're used to do, what we're used to do in our curricula. But when we look a little bit closer and we try to visualize this in this picture, we see that the job or task characteristics, the individual characteristics and the characteristics of the work environment, that make a difference. When we look at the task characteristics, it's found to be important that learners are confronted with a variety of ill-structured and complex tasks, non-routine, real-life tasks, that they are stimulated to learn and to discover by themselves. So they need a certain degree of freedom to be able to handle for themselves. And they should be confronted with complex tasks that necessitate problem solving and interaction with others. So you can't do it on your own, actually. And this is in line with the concepts of change I talked about earlier. And although attuning to the zone of proximal development is important, and already told this earlier, the complexity preservation of the task is essential. So learning in authentic, complex situation, that's what makes a difference. When we look at the individual characteristics, and Jos told us about the fit and the misfit, we see that the domain-specific knowledge and the domain-specific skills are very important to be able to deal with change. You need those things. What we see also in the individual characteristics, I'm going too fast, is that it helps that you have experience in coping with uncertain situations, with novel situations, with unpredictable situations, and that you have experience in working in authentic and open-ended learning problems. So just implement it once, just one semester in your whole curricula isn't enough to prepare our students for dealing with change. We have to progress that all the line in our educational programs. And when you look at the work and learning environment, the supportive supervisor behavior is key. It is not a supervisor who is showing how it should be, but it's a supervisor who is stimulating the students to experiment, to make mistakes, and to help them why did this happen and what does that mean for your professional development. So it's on active reflection and critical reflective behavior stimulation. The feedback based on these mistakes, that is crucial to learn from this. And then our review on work-based learning, it was the second review, we found similar results, specifically for workplace learning. And this contributed to adaptive expertise in different ways. It's also about working on challenging and authentic problems in a complex work contexts, and contexts also where learners were encouraged to make mistakes and to experiment. And I'm not aware if someone has watched the news in the Netherlands lately, but when you look at this working environments where you can experiment, where you can try, where you can fail, it's not that usual in all domains. In the media and entertainment sector in the Netherlands, something went terribly wrong in the last few years, I think. We have to encourage our learner through self-inquiry to revalue their competencies to address the problem. And actually, and this is of utmost importance, to make a conceptual change. You have to be aware that what you have done in the past doesn't suit this situation or working on this task anymore. You have to make a shift in thinking. And that is something that maybe someone is perceiving a misfit, but that doesn't automatically mean that you have to learn new skills. Sometimes it's just about making a mental shift to do things differently. Well, these are the building blocks. It's also about changing roles and perspectives, and the changing roles and perspectives help students to look through the eyes of the other and to have a meaning making. Why is he thinking like this and he thinking like that? And what does this mean for me to make a new solution? I already talked about interaction with others. And what is important is the willingness for lifelong learning. And that is something that perhaps is inside of the student, but we also can create beautiful learning environments which stimulate the learners, which have a motivation environment to learn and to keep on learning. In this research, adaptive work, which is a large research project working on 6 universities of applied sciences and 5 universities together, these universities they believe they have running programs targeted on adaptive expertise development. And 2 of them we will show in our spotlight session at 1:15 this afternoon, which they will tell them about what they are doing in their work-based programs. And the first one is about the masterklinieken. Perhaps they were part of the school visits, I'm not quite sure. But that is a collaboration between the Han and the Radboud UMC on dental care and oral care. And the second case is from the Wageningen University, and that's about transdisciplinary learning on societal issues. So if you're curious what is actually happening in these educational programs and what works in adaptive expertise development, how have they operationalized what I just told, then please come to our spotlight session. And as I think you have heard in my talk, I talk about complex problems. I talk about authentic situation, and I talk about work-based learning. And as we see, bringing together the world of work and together in the world of education is very important to prepare our students to be able to deal with change. And that brings us to part 2, bringing together the world of work and the world of education. And Jos, I think you would remind us of this slide.
I thought it was I was going to do it 2 slides ahead, but yeah, well, this is about the work context, right? The work context in this definition. So how can we prepare a work context in which this working on fit and adaptive expertise actually really works and gets used the way it should be? So there's a lot of options to do so, and I think this is an option Wietske can explain a little bit more about, because this is, what was it again? The learning area at a conference somewhere?
Yes, it was at the early conference. I don't know if some of them went there, but it was in Paderborn. It was a beautiful area, and this really struck me, because also this early conference was about workplace and work-based learning. And then we saw this learning area in the building of the university. And I do believe this is a nice spot to meet, to drink some coffee, to have a chit-chat. But I'm not sure if this is what we mean by a motivating learning area where students can learn something.
And I think many other people thought the same, because it's empty.
It's empty. No one's sitting here, actually. Well, I do think we move on to more like this. And I have entered 3 examples here. The upper one, and I'm not sure if you see, no, you don't see it. It's on the ozone. It's the IPKW. It's the Industrial Park Kleefsewaard at Arnhem, where students and professionals are working together on issues on energy transition. So actually it's happening outside this building, although this is a beautiful building. It's into the real world, working on real issues. And the one with the green ones and the big group at the left, is it for you? That is an example in Termion. It's a health center just across the bridge in Nijmegen. It's one of our, as we call, Spark centers, where students from different professions, professionals, citizens, people from government are working together also on an issue. And this is a picture from quite a few years ago, where the people of Lent wanted to work on healthy aging in Lent. And they built on existing evidence-based programs on healthy aging, but within this group where students and professionals and citizens were working together to attune this program to the needs of the people in Lent, actually. And as you can see, this is, for students, there were different processes, and each half year a new group of students entered this project to work on with the citizens and the professionals. And it's really thinking from outside in. So these students didn't have assignments from school to do at the workplace, but we'll see what is happening actually there at the workplace and how can we learn from it and how can we award these learning processes. And the other one, the orchestra, is quite a different example, but I really liked it, so I want to mention it here. This is an orchestra. It seems like just a normal orchestra. It's developed by Nono Poels. It's a colleague from the Graafschap College in vocational education. And all these people involved, they had to be able to join in duos. So I couldn't bring Jos, because Jos is working at the same educational institution as I am, so he is from the same activity system, actually, but I could bring my neighbor, for example, or I could bring my son to this orchestra. And the opportunity is, we have to pick an instrument which we have never been tried before. So we all had to learn something new from scratch. And within this group, they also talked about what is going to happen now. Maybe you're a professor and maybe you're just the neighbor, but you're all starting from scratch. There was no hierarchy left, so all people tried to do something new. And I think this is a really good way to stimulate the lifelong learning in a more equal way. And in these examples, this does ask a lot of things for us as educators. And as educators, we have to act a little bit more like a broker, a knowledge broker, acting between the worlds of education and between the worlds of practice. And actually, the competences a knowledge broker needs are quite different from the competencies we're used to work as we are a teacher. In our own study of M.A. Hoeven, my colleague, we found that we have distinctive competences, and I will give an example. The broker is being able to connect stakeholders in the ecosystem or the learning and working environment to switch between educational and stakeholder interests. They're all joining at the table, but you have to balance between them. You have to be able to stimulate co-creation and to facilitate learning of all stakeholders involved, not only of the students of your own discipline, but of different disciplines, and also the learning of the adults, of the professionals who are involved. So as educational professionals, we have to overcome various challenges ourselves to act like this and to be able to act like this. And this actually, again, requires for an HRD's perspective within their own educational institution. So back to the role of the educators in supporting competence development for future professionals. We see that educators face the challenge of exposing learners to authentic, complex tasks that are new to those who work on them and whose outcome is uncertain, where they can use their acquired knowledge and skills, but where they are challenged to rethink what works exactly through interaction with others. And where they work and learn together with others, and where there's room to involve people with different knowledge or action base if the issue requires this. We have to challenge them to reflect critically on their actions and making explicit certain expectations, why something did or did not work, and arriving at new perspectives for actions so that they can develop the self-confidence to move on such issues. Well, and not every work environment lends itself to this. So if we're able to prepare our students in this world of work and they end up in a working environment which asks something differently, then we're doing something really wrong. And this brings us to the last part of our talk, and we're already over time, I see. So Jos, I think we should do it in a hurry.
I can't, actually. Can you put the last slide back? Because I already said I was with an HRD perspective, but you are all educators, right? And on this slide, it just struck me that there's a few errors on the slide. So you must have seen them as well, or not? Is it something that I have? I'm glad that this is an in progress, because I see duizendpoot, but it's Dutch, right? Mm-hmm. So it should be duizendpoot, and I see spinnenwebben, and I guess it should be spinnenwebben. Is that not an educator's perspective as well? Maybe I have a little of both, but just to be annoying. I would like to tell you something more about the development that we are in right now of creating stronger learning and working environments. Just trying to combine like what Wietske has told us about adaptive expertise, and trying to find ways to have these inspirations from these orchestras and from these different types of learning and working places, which actually could contribute to people continuously working on this fit and reaching this fit during work, during education, but also combining education and work together. So this is just to introduce you to a project we are doing together. So there's the perspectives combined on finding ways to have stronger learning and working environments. The basis for this study is a review study on designing workplace learning in vocational education, so specifically aimed at how can we create working places that suit students the best for them to learn a new profession. So that inspired us to try and find ways to actually come about those environments where also people who are already working there, professionals, who try to learn these students the trades of their profession, could also learn from the students, because we actually have the feeling that students might be a lot smarter than most professionals, or not in every aspect, but in some aspects, you might wonder who's the student and who's the teacher. So we're trying to find ways to combine these perspectives. So the findings of this research, this piece of research, this review study, shows us that research on effective strategies is actually very limited. So really affects studies on what actually works in these workplace settings. Workplace learning is really chaotic. Damn, I think I love you. Learning and guidance, little attention. So learning and guidance receives little attention in all these studies, as does reflection on learning processes, which also receives little attention in these studies. So those are like really interesting conclusions from these studies, resulting in 11 design principles for workplace learning in vocational education and training. So we took these 11 principles as a basis for our study, with the main question on, can we use these 11 principles to design appropriate work contexts in the sustainable employability perspective, right? So the working context that actually enables workers to take up realizable opportunities to enhance their employability, to remain employable, to regain fit when they are perceiving a certain amount of misfit. Enabling both future current staff to sustain their employability with continuous learning. So we set out to test these 11 principles with HR professionals, combining that with a literature review on, workplace learning, effective workplace learning strategies in non-vet professions, and to explore within 7 pilot projects that were actually happening, to see whether these principles would suit what happens within these pilot projects. And the result of those 3 steps were 18 design principles for stronger learning and working environments, or powerful learning working environments. I see that I have the abbreviations a little mixed up in this slide. And next, we discussed these 18 principles also with HRD practitioners in different settings, right? So healthcare, education, also process industry. So chocolate is awaiting. And amend and combine these principles. And that resulted in 13 design principles for a stronger learning and working environment. But the chair took away our time, so should I stop?
Yeah, yes, please.
You can, of course, get the slides from us. I would have loved to explain the 13 principles in short. There was a movie or a little video, an animation of these 13 principles, but that is only in Dutch. But I'm happy to share that, and I'll see whether, if we get it through DeepL, it will also be in English, but I don't think that works like that. So thank you for your attention. I think Wietske, are you going to take them?
Yeah, I think just
messages?
A few take-home messages. That's the last slide. I hope you remember from our talk that change is constant, and we need at this moment curricular and pedagogical changes to learn these professionals to be part of the change and not chasing the change. Learn for and from new tasks, and we have to learn with complex ill-structured problems. And we have to shift, and this was actually a quote from Mindy Howard, one of the professionals we talked in our adapted work process, from competent lone wolves into together we can figure it out mentality, and bringing together the worlds of work and education. And we, as HRM professionals and educators, have an important part to play. Thank you very much for your attention.